So let's dive into this really powerful biblical metaphor. It asks a pretty tough question. How do you tell the real deal, true faith, from just a really convincing performance? It's all wrapped up in a story about a field, a harvest, and a fascinating process of purification.
Okay, let's kick things off with this verse. Right away, it paints a picture of, well, sabotage. You've got a field of good grain, and an enemy comes in secretly and plants something totally fake. This is deliberate, you know? It creates this hidden conflict that's only going to come to light much later.
And that, of course, brings us to the big question at the heart of this whole thing. If a community of believers is supposed to be God's field, then why do we see things like hypocrisy and deception in it? It's a question a lot of people wonder about, whether they're people of faith or not. All right, first up, let's really unpack this core metaphor. It's using something we all understand, farming, to explain a pretty complex spiritual reality.
So, right off the bat, what this tells us is that from the very beginning, the community of faith is a mixed bag. It's not some sanitized greenhouse where only perfect plants grow. Nope, it's a real-world field where the genuine stuff and the imposters are growing right next to each other. And honestly, at first, you can barely tell them apart.
But what's really interesting here is the specific nature of these weeds, or tares. In Korean, they're called garaji. See, a tare isn't just a wheat stalk that didn't turn out right. It's a completely different kind of seed, planted by an enemy. It might look a lot like wheat, but here's the key. It can never become wheat. Its origin is different. Okay, so if you've got these two things growing side by side, how in the world do you tell them apart? Well, the text suggests that even though they might look similar for a while, their true nature eventually becomes really obvious.
And this is where we see the really crucial difference. The tares, the garachi, they look great on the outside. They have these impressive, lush leaves. It's a performance, called oshik in Korean, and it's all about outward appearance. But the wheat, or algok, it's identified by its fruit, the actual grain. It's all about substance over style. So this is the logical next question, right? I mean, if you can spot the fakes, the imposters, why would you just leave them there? Why not clean up the field and protect the real crop? It just makes sense. But here's the thing. The instruction in the parable is super clear. You wait. And the reason is that their roots are all tangled up together. If a person tries to judge and rip out what they think is a tare, they could end up causing devastating damage to the genuine wheat right next to it. The separation, we're told, is a divine job, not a human one. Okay, so if it's not our job to do the separating, then how does it actually happen? Well, the metaphor shifts now. We move from the field to the threshing floor, which is where the real sorting of the harvest takes place. And this is where we get introduced to the main tool for the job, the winnowing fork. If you can picture it, back in the day, a farmer would use this big fork to toss the harvested stalks up into the air. The heavy, valuable grain would fall straight back down, but the light, useless bits, the chaff, would just get carried away by the wind. So in this metaphor, that winnowing fork, or ki in Korean, is God's instrument for purification. And this isn't just about some far-off judgment day. It actually represents the ongoing things that happen in a community that test people and reveal what their faith is really made of. And the source material breaks this down into two main ways this happens. First, you have the fork of trials. When things get tough, hardship, opposition, persecution, those whose faith is just on the surface get exposed pretty quickly. And second, there's the fork of temptation. Things like money, pride, weird new ideas, or chasing after flashy miracles. All of these act like a powerful filter, sifting everyone in the community. Now let's zoom in a bit on that second one, the fork of temptation. The source really highlights an intense version of this sifting that it says is going to be a major feature of the end times. Now, this next idea is pretty challenging, not gonna lie. The source text, drawing from 2 Thessalonians, suggests that God actually allows incredibly powerful and convincing deceptions to show up. And why? Because they serve as a really effective winnowing fork. The passage starts by describing where this deception comes from. It's all about these compelling but totally false signs and wonders. A big spectacle designed to lead people astray. And then comes the part that really makes you stop and think. It says that God actually sends this powerful delusion. Now, in the logic of this whole metaphor, this isn't about being malicious. It's an act of purification. It's like that final, powerful toss of the grain into the air to see what's heavy and what's just lightweight chaff. So, what's the point of all this? Well, The text says the purpose is to bring judgment on people who, deep down, didn't actually love the truth and instead got a kick out of wickedness. The delusion just brings a preference that was already there to the surface.
So, with all that going on, what's the safeguard? How do you avoid getting fooled? Well, it's about knowing the shepherd's voice, which the source says is God's word. The real test is whether you stick to the truth of the word or get swept away by the big, flashy spectacle. All right, let's bring this all together. What's the final outcome here? After all this sifting and winnowing, what happens to the wheat and what happens to the tares? And this is where their paths just completely split. The wheat, the genuine faith, it doesn't get destroyed by this process. Actually, it gets refined. The trials and tests make it stronger, and it ends up producing even better fruit. But the tares, they just can't handle it. They have no substance, so they get exposed as useless chaff and are finally separated and thrown out.
And this is so important to get. That winnowing process, it touches everyone. No one in the field gets a pass from the winds of trial and temptation. It's a universal experience. The difference isn't whether you go through it, but how your faith holds up when you do. And so, after all that, this ancient metaphor leaves us with a really personal and, frankly, a pretty provocative question. It shifts our focus away from trying to spot the tares in other people, and it turns the spotlight right back on ourselves. It asks us to stop looking at the leaves of our performance and to take a good, hard look at the actual fruit our lives are producing.